June 27, 1977. Duluth police receive a call from a mansion on Lake Superior's shore. When they arrive, they find two bodies. One is an 83-year-old heiress. The other is her night nurse. What they don't find is any logical reason why someone would murder Minnesota's wealthiest widow in a house worth millions. The scene tells a story, but it's a confused one. Velma Pietila lies at the base of the grand staircase, her skull shattered by repeated blows from a brass candlestick. 9 strikes. The medical examiner will count each one. The weapon sits nearby, abandoned in haste or panic. Blood has pooled on the marble floor, the kind of stone imported from Italy 70 years earlier, when money meant something different than it does now. Upstairs, in a second-floor bedroom with hand-painted wallpaper and a view of the lake, Elizabeth Congdon appears to be sleeping. She isn't. Someone has pressed a satin pillow over her face until her heart stopped. No struggle, no defense wounds. An elderly woman confined to a wheelchair, unable to fight back against whoever entered her room in the hours before dawn. The house itself seems violated. Glensheen Mansion, 39 rooms of Gilded Age excess, has stood on this shoreline since 1908. Tiffany glass, carved mahogany, imported fabrics, custom furniture built by craftsmen whose names have been forgotten. 7.5 acres of manicured grounds overlooking a lake that stretches like an inland sea. This is not the kind of place where people get bludgeoned on staircases. But here's what makes detectives pause. A window on the first floor stands open. Jewelry is missing from Elizabeth's room. The scene has been staged to look like a robbery, but the staging is sloppy. Professional thieves don't leave candlesticks at crime scenes. They don't kill night nurses and then proceed upstairs to smother wealthy invalids. This has the marks of something else entirely. The Congdon name carries weight in Duluth. Chester Congdon built an iron ore empire in the 1890s, became one of Minnesota's wealthiest men, constructed this mansion as proof of his arrival. His daughter Elizabeth inherited not just the house, but the fortune behind it. Estimates place her wealth between $8 and $12 million. In 1977, that's the kind of money that generates attention. The kind that makes people do unspeakable things. Within hours, investigators start asking the question that will define this case. Who benefits from Elizabeth Congdon's death? The answer leads them to family. It always does. Marjorie Congdon Caldwell, the adopted daughter with a history of fires and debts and marriages that end badly. Roger Caldwell, her current husband, a man with financial troubles of his own. 2 people with motive, 2 people with access. 2 people who might look at an elderly woman in a mansion and see the solution to every problem they've ever had. The investigation has barely begun, but the conclusion seems inevitable. Someone killed for money. Someone killed for inheritance. Someone looked at Glensheen and decided its value exceeded the life of the woman who lived there. 1892. Chester Adgate Congdon steps off a train in Duluth with $7 in his pocket and a law degree from Syracuse University. He's 37 years old. Late to the game of fortune-making, but he's arrived in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. Duluth sits at the western tip of Lake Superior, and beneath the forests of northern Minnesota lies something more valuable than timber, iron ore, billions of tons of it. Congdon doesn't mine the ore himself. That's not where the real money is. He's a lawyer, and lawyers in the Iron Range business broker deals, secure mineral rights, structure companies, and take their cut from every transaction. Within 2 years, he's representing mining operations. Within 5, he's investing in them. Within a decade, he's one of the primary stakeholders in ore lands that feed the steel mills of Pittsburgh and Chicago. The numbers tell the story better than any description could. By 1905, Chester Congdon controls mineral rights worth millions. His personal fortune reaches approximately $35 million. Adjust that for inflation, and you're looking at over $1 billion in modern currency. He's not Rockefeller or Carnegie, but in Minnesota, he's untouchable. The iron ore from his properties becomes railroads, bridges, buildings, warships. American industry runs on metal pulled from ground he owns. But there's a problem with being that wealthy in a place like Duluth. The city has grown rapidly, from 10,000 people in 1880 to nearly 80,000 by 1900, but it's still not New York. It's not Boston. The social circles that matter, the networks that define American aristocracy, exist 1,000 miles away. Congdon needs something that announces his status in a way that cannot be misunderstood. He needs architecture. 1905. He purchases 7.5 acres on the shore of Lake Superior, 22 miles of pristine waterfront where the lake stretches beyond the horizon like an ocean. The location itself costs $40,000, roughly $1.4 million today. That's just for the land. What he plans to build on it will cost 20 times that amount. He hires Clarence Johnston, Minnesota's most prominent architect, the man who designed the state capitol building. Johnston specializes in grand institutional structures, buildings meant to last centuries and convey permanence. Together, they design a Jacobean revival mansion, 39 rooms spread across 27,000 square feet. The style is deliberately English, deliberately aristocratic, a visual argument that American wealth can equal old-world refinement. The budget is $854,000. 50 years earlier, that sum could have purchased several city blocks in Manhattan. Chester Congdon is spending it on a single house. Construction begins in 1905 and continues for 3 years. 200 craftsmen work in shifts. Italian stonemasons carve fireplaces from imported marble. Woodworkers install mahogany paneling harvested from Central America. Metalworkers forge custom fixtures. Every bathroom gets hot and cold running water. Every bedroom gets its own radiator. The house has electricity, telephone lines, and a coal-fired heating system that can warm the entire structure even when winter temperatures drop below zero. Clara Congdon, Chester's wife, works with landscape architects to design formal gardens, English-style perennial borders, a reflecting pool, walking paths through carefully managed woods, a boa house on the lakeshore where the family keeps watercraft for summer recreation. Every detail is considered, every element is expensive. By 1908, Glensheen is complete. Chester, Clara, and their 7 children move in. The house has 20 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a billiard room, a library, a breakfast room separate from the formal dining room, and servant quarters for the staff required to maintain a property of this scale. This isn't just a home, it's a declaration. The Congdons have arrived and they've built something that will outlast all of them. 1905. The first excavation begins on virgin forest overlooking Lake Superior. What Chester Congdon envisions isn't just large, it's technically audacious for its time. A mansion this size requires infrastructure that doesn't exist in Duluth. Water systems, electrical wiring, heating capacity that can fight Minnesota winters where temperatures sink to 20 below zero. The architect, Clarence Johnston, has designed the state capitol. He knows how to build for permanence. The foundation alone takes months. Workers dig through clay and bedrock to create a basement that spans nearly the entire footprint of the house. This isn't decorative. The basement will house the coal-fired boiler system, storage rooms, and the mechanical guts that make a building this ambitious actually function. Above ground, the structure rises in red brick and Indiana limestone, Jacobean revival style, all steep gables and elaborate chimneys, more English manor house than American mansion. But the real expense isn't the structure. It's what goes inside. Chester Congdon doesn't buy off catalogs. He commissions. The dining room gets a hand-carved oak fireplace with columns and ornamental panels designed specifically for this space. Cost: $3,000, roughly $100,000 in modern money, for a fireplace. The library receives floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookcases with hidden compartments and brass fixtures. The breakfast room, a space the family will use daily, gets custom furniture built to match the room's proportions. The stained glass comes from Tiffany Studios in New York. Not reproductions, not approximations. Actual Tiffany windows designed for specific locations throughout the house. The staircase landing features a landscape scene in colored glass that catches morning light. The cost for these windows isn't recorded separately, but Tiffany commissions in this period run $5,000 to $10,000 per major installation. Glensheen has multiple installations. Every bathroom, and there are 5 of them, receives Italian marble. The tile work alone requires specialists brought in from Chicago. Hot water reaches every floor through a system of copper pipes that snake through walls and under floorboards. In 1907, most American homes don't have indoor plumbing. Glensheen has heated towel racks. The estate extends beyond the main house. Chester builds a boathouse on the lakeshore, 2 stories tall with quarters for a caretaker. A carriage house holds vehicles and equipment. A gardener's cottage sits near the formal gardens, where specialists maintain flower beds that require year-round attention. Walking paths curve through cultivated woods. A clay tennis court occupies a flat section of grounds. 7.5 acres transformed from wilderness into controlled landscape. Clara Congdon oversees the interior decoration. She travels to Europe, purchases furniture, textiles, and art. The drawing room gets a Steinway piano. The bedrooms receive custom wardrobes designed to fit the unusual ceiling heights Johnston has specified. Even the servants' quarters on the 3rd floor get details that exceed standard construction. Wallpaper in every room. Proper windows with views. This isn't generosity. It's a statement about the kind of household the Congdons intend to maintain. The final cost reaches $854,000. For context, Henry Clay Frick's mansion in New York, completed around the same time, costs approximately $5 million. But Frick is building in Manhattan. Chester Congdon is building in Duluth. Relative to location, relative to local economy, Glensheen represents an equivalent display of wealth. 1908. The Congdon family moves in. Chester is 53, Clara is 48. Their children range from teenagers to young adults. The household staff includes a cook, housemaids, a laundress, groundskeepers, a chauffeur. At full capacity, Glensheen employs 12 people just to maintain daily operations. The coal furnace requires constant feeding. The gardens need tending. The wood floors demand polishing. Wealth at this scale isn't passive. It requires labor to sustain. And sustain it they do. For 7 decades, Glensheen remains in Congdon hands. The house witnesses weddings, births, deaths, the passage of American history from Gilded Age, excess through 2 world wars, and into the atomic era. It stands exactly as Chester intended. Permanent. Unshakable. A monument that will outlast the fortune that built it. The Congdons fill their mansion with children. 6 daughters and 1 son, though the boy isn't born to Clara. After the death of a close family friend, Chester and Clara adopt the infant, raising him alongside their biological children. This is the world Elizabeth Congdon enters in 1894, 12 years before Glensheen exists. She grows up watching her father's fortune expand, watching the mansion rise, from forest to finished monument. Elizabeth is the 4th daughter, born into wealth but not spoiled by it in the usual sense. The Congdon children receive education, expectations, and access to society, but Chester maintains a surprising practicality about money. He believes in work. He believes his children should understand the source of their privilege. When Elizabeth comes of age, she attends Vassar College, one of the few women's institutions offering serious academic education. She studies, travels, and returns to Duluth unmarried. She never marries. This isn't unusual for wealthy women of her generation, but it is significant. Without a husband, without children of her own, Elizabeth's inheritance remains entirely hers. She lives at Glensheen with her parents, manages philanthropic work, and quietly becomes one of Minnesota's most generous benefactors. Schools, hospitals, arts organizations. She writes checks without demanding buildings be named after her. 1916. Chester Congdon dies at age 61. The estate he leaves behind is valued at approximately $5.5 million, worth over $150 million today. Clara inherits the bulk of it, along with Glensheen itself. The children receive trusts, carefully structured to provide income without granting full control. Chester understood something about generational wealth. Give too much, too fast, and it vanishes. Restrict access, and it compounds. Clara continues at Glensheen for another 3 decades. She maintains the house, the gardens, the staff. The 1920s boom passes. The Depression arrives, and the Congdon fortune weathers it better than most, insulated by diversified investments and mineral rights that continue producing revenue regardless of stock market crashes. World War II comes and goes. Clara ages in the house where she raised her children, surrounded by the objects she selected, walking paths she designed. 1950. Clara dies at age 90. Elizabeth, now 56, inherits Glensheen and the remaining fortune. By this point, several of her siblings have passed away. The family that once filled 39 rooms has contracted. Elizabeth lives in the mansion with household staff and, increasingly, with nurses. She suffers from health problems, spends time in a wheelchair, requires assistance with daily activities. But she keeps the house immaculate. Every room maintained as if Clara might return. The Tiffany windows cleaned regularly. The mahogany polished. The gardens tended by professionals who understand the original design. Elizabeth treats Glensheen not as property, but as inheritance in the deeper sense, something held in trust for a future she won't see. The 1960s and 70s bring change to Duluth. The iron ore industry contracts, shipping declines. The city that boomed on mining and transportation now struggles to find its next economic foundation. The Congdon fortune, built on ore and managed conservatively across generations, remains substantial. Estimates place Elizabeth's wealth between $8 and $12 million by the mid-70s. She lives quietly. Philanthropy continues. She endows scholarships, funds medical research, supports arts institutions. Her name appears on donor lists, but rarely in society pages. This is old money behaving as old money should, invisible except in the institutions it sustains. By 1977, Elizabeth is 83 years old. Her health has declined to the point where round-the-clock nursing care is necessary. Velma Pietola works the night shift, sleeping in a room near Elizabeth's, available if needed. The household has contracted to essential staff. The mansion, built for a family of 9+ servants, now houses one elderly woman and the people paid to care for her. She has no children of her own. The fortune will pass to nieces, nephews, adopted children. The house itself, according to plans made years earlier, will go to the University of Minnesota. Elizabeth has decided Glensheen should become something public, something preserved. A museum, perhaps. A window into a world that no longer exists. She has months to live. She doesn't know someone has decided not to wait. Marjorie Mannering enters the Congdon family in 1932 as an infant. Elizabeth adopts her, raises her at Glensheen with every advantage the fortune can provide. Private schools, travel, society connections. The girl wants for nothing material. But something is wrong from the beginning, and people who know the family will later say they saw it early. The fires start young. A family cabin in northern Minnesota burns under suspicious circumstances when Marjorie is nearby. Insurance investigators ask questions, but prove nothing. Later, a desk at her boarding school catches fire. Again, no charges. The pattern establishes itself: destruction, suspicion, and an inability to prove, ability to intent. She's expelled from Dana Hall School in Massachusetts, then from another institution. The reasons vary, but the theme remains consistent. Marjorie doesn't follow rules that apply to other people. The marriages come next. She's 21 when she marries Richard Leroy, son of a wealthy family. The union lasts 4 years and produces 2 children before collapsing. Then comes Richard Webster in 1968. That marriage brings a certain stability, at least financially. Webster has resources of his own. But Marjorie's spending exceeds any reasonable budget. Antiques, jewelry, travel, horses. She burns through money at a rate that alarms even Elizabeth, who has never been stingy with family. Webster dies in 1972, under circumstances that raise quiet questions. He's found dead at a family property, officially ruled natural causes, though he's only in his 50s. Marjorie inherits his estate. Within months, that money is gone too. She has a gift for spending that approaches pathological. $50,000 disappears in weeks, then another $20,000. The checks keep coming, and the accounts keep emptying. 1975. Marjorie marries Roger Caldwell in a ceremony that her family largely avoids. Roger is broke, worse than broke. He carries debts, failed business ventures, and a history of financial desperation. He's also physically imposing, quick to anger, and entirely dependent on Marjorie's connection to Congdon money. Together, they represent a combustible combination. Her compulsive spending meets his willingness to do whatever it takes to maintain cash flow. Elizabeth continues to help. She pays bills, covers debts, wires money, when Marjorie calls with another emergency. But the assistance comes with restrictions. Elizabeth has established trust funds for Marjorie that provide income but not principal access. This is standard practice for families with this kind of wealth. Protect the assets from a single generation's poor judgment, but for Marjorie, these trusts represent an obstacle. She needs cash immediately, not monthly distributions. She has creditors demanding payment. Roger has gambling debts. Together, they owe more than $100,000, roughly $500,000 in modern currency. The phone calls to Elizabeth become more frequent, more desperate. Can she advance money from the trust? Can she co-sign a loan? Can she liquidate certain investments? Elizabeth refuses most requests. She's watched Marjorie destroy every financial gift she's ever received. The answer becomes no more often than yes. By 1977, Marjorie and Roger are living in Colorado, far from Minnesota and the family that increasingly wants distance. They occupy a lifestyle they cannot afford. Credit cards are maxed. Creditors are calling. Roger has no legitimate employment. Marjorie has exhausted her options with Elizabeth. The trust funds will continue paying out modest amounts, but that's not enough, not remotely enough. There's only one substantial asset left: Elizabeth herself. Her estate, estimated between $8 and $12 million, will eventually be distributed to family. Marjorie stands to inherit a significant portion. The exact amount depends on how the will is structured, but it's life-changing money, millions in cash and property. The problem is simple. Elizabeth is 83, but might live another 5 years, another 10. And every year she lives is another year of mounting debt, angry creditors, and Roger Caldwell growing more volatile. Waiting is not an option they can afford. Someone needs to make a decision. Someone needs to act. And in the spring of 1977, it appears that someone does. June 26, 1977. Roger Caldwell boards a plane in Denver. His destination is Minneapolis, 350 miles from Duluth. He doesn't fly direct to the city where the murder will occur. That would be too obvious. Instead, he lands in the Twin Cities, rents a car using his own name, and begins the drive north along Interstate 35 toward Lake Superior. The route takes him through smaller towns, past Iron Range country, through landscape that once made the Congdon fortune possible. He arrives in Duluth after dark. The rental car is later found parked several blocks from Glensheen. He doesn't pull into the driveway. He approaches on foot, moving through grounds he's visited before. Marjorie has brought him here. He knows the layout. Sometime after midnight, he enters the mansion. How he gets in remains disputed. A window is found open later, but investigators suspect he had a key. Marjorie would have access to keys. The house is dark except for nightlights and hallways. Velma Pietila, the night nurse, sleeps in a room on the second floor but makes periodic checks on Elizabeth. She's 56 years old, competent, attentive to her patients' needs. She discovers Roger on the staircase. What happens next is brutal and simple. He has a brass candlestick, heavy enough to kill, decorative enough to blend with Glensheen's furnishings. He strikes her. She falls. He continues striking, 9 times. The medical examiner will later count each impact, document each fracture. Velma dies on the marble floor, her blood spreading across stone that cost a fortune to import 70 years earlier. Roger proceeds upstairs. He knows where Elizabeth sleeps. Her room faces the lake, first-class accommodations. Even in a house where every room is first class, she's in bed, elderly and frail, unable to defend herself even if she were awake. He takes a pillow and presses it over her face. She suffocates. No struggle, no screaming, just pressure and time until her heart stops. Now he searches. The crime scene suggests he's looking for jewelry, small valuable items that can be sold quickly. He takes a Byzantine coin, a gold piece that Elizabeth kept in her room. He takes other items, though police reports never fully catalog what's missing. The goal is to make this look like robbery, a break-in gone wrong, random violence by an intruder seeking valuables. But he makes mistakes, critical ones, a fingerprint on a window frame, a gold coin that's too distinctive to sell anonymously, travel records that place him in Minnesota when he's supposed to be in Colorado. He stages the scene but does it badly, like someone who's watched crime shows but never committed actual crimes. He leaves before dawn. The drive back to Minneapolis, the flight to Denver. He's home before anyone discovers the bodies. In his mind, perhaps, the plan has worked. He's created distance. He's established an alibi of sorts. He's taken items that suggest robbery. But the evidence tells a different story. Velma wasn't killed by a burglar startled during a theft. She was killed by someone who needed her out of the way to reach Elizabeth. The brutality speaks to desperation, not professional detachment. And Elizabeth's murder, quiet and methodical, suggests someone who knew exactly where to find her. Police will later theorize about phone calls between Colorado and Minnesota in the days before the murders. They'll find records of financial desperation, debts that couldn't be paid, creditors threatening legal action. They'll build a case around simple motive. Marjorie needed her mother's money. Roger needed Marjorie's instructions to be worth following. Together they represented a conspiracy born from debt and enabled by family dysfunction. The physical evidence supports this. The fingerprint belongs to Roger. The coin he tries to sell is Elizabeth's. His travel records place him at the scene. But proving Marjorie's involvement requires more than showing she benefited. It requires proving she planned, directed, and conspired. That will prove much harder than anyone expects. The bodies are discovered mid-morning on June 27th. A day nurse arrives for her shift and finds Velma at the base of the staircase. She finds Elizabeth upstairs. Within an hour, Duluth police transform Glensheen into a crime scene. Detectives photograph every room, dust for prints, catalog potential evidence. The house that once hosted society gatherings now swarms with investigators, documenting violence. The staged robbery falls apart quickly. Professional thieves don't murder night nurses with candlesticks and then carefully smother elderly women in their beds. The window left open is too obvious. The missing jewelry is selective, not the kind of grab-and-run theft that real burglars commit. This has the marks of someone trying to create the appearance of random crime while executing something far more personal. The fingerprint changes everything. Technicians lift a clear print from a window envelope in Elizabeth's bedroom. It belongs to Roger Caldwell. The database match comes back within days. Roger has a record, minor offenses, enough to put his prints in the system. Suddenly, the investigation has a name and a direction. Detectives pull Roger's travel records. He flew from Denver to Minneapolis on June 26th. He rented a car at the airport using his own identification. The rental company has documentation, signatures, credit card receipts. He returned the car on June 27th. The mileage matches a round trip to Duluth. He flew back to Colorado that same day, but there's more. Investigators contact jewelers in the Denver area, asking if anyone has tried to sell unusual coins or antique jewelry. A shop owner in Golden, Colorado remembers Roger. He brought in a Byzantine gold coin, distinctive and valuable. The jeweler asked questions about provenance. Roger claimed it was a family heirloom. The jeweler, suspicious, made a note of the transaction. That coin matches the description of one missing from Elizabeth's collection. The case builds rapidly. Phone records show calls between the Caldwell residence in Colorado and Glensheen in the days before the murders. Financial records reveal the depth of Roger and Marjorie's debts, over $100,000 owed to various creditors. Credit cards maxed. Loans in default. Collection agencies pursuing payment. Roger is arrested in July. He maintains innocence, claims he was in Colorado, suggests the evidence is fabricated. But the fingerprint is real. The travel records are documented. The coin is Elizabeth's. His defense collapses under the weight of physical evidence. Marjorie's arrest comes in September. The case against her is different, more circumstantial. She wasn't in Duluth. She didn't leave fingerprints. She didn't kill anyone directly. But prosecutors believe she orchestrated everything. The motive is overwhelming. She inherits millions from Elizabeth's estate. She had the means, providing Roger with information about the house layout, possibly a key, certainly encouragement. She had opportunity, being far from the crime scene, and thus establishing plausible deniability. The prosecution's theory is straightforward. Marjorie needed money immediately. Elizabeth wouldn't provide it. The trust funds were locked. The only solution was Elizabeth's death. Marjorie recruited Roger, the desperate husband willing to do anything to solve their financial crisis. She stayed in Colorado while he flew to Minnesota. She maintained distance while he committed murder. Classic conspiracy. One person plans, another executes. But proving this requires more than motive. It requires evidence of communication, planning, agreement. Phone calls aren't enough. Debts aren't enough. Inheritance isn't enough. The prosecution needs something concrete linking Marjorie to the planning of these specific murders. They don't have it. Not yet. What they have is a desperate woman with a history of suspicious fires, a dead mother worth millions, and a husband whose fingerprints place him at the murder scene. In Duluth, a city that hasn't seen this kind of case in decades, it's enough to proceed. 2 murder trials, 2 defendants, a family fortune at stake, and a Gilded Age mansion at the center of it all. The national media descends. The story is too perfect, too dark, too wealthy to ignore. Roger Caldwell's trial begins in Brainerd, Minnesota in April 1978. The venue change comes after defense attorneys argue he cannot receive a fair trial in Duluth, where the Congdon name carries too much weight. The prosecution presents its case methodically. The fingerprint on the envelope, the travel records, the Byzantine coin, the rental car mileage, the timeline that places Roger at Glensheen during the hours when 2 women were murdered. The defense attacks each piece. They argue the fingerprint could have been left during a previous visit. Roger had been to Glensheen before with Marjorie. Perhaps he handled that envelope weeks earlier. The travel records prove he was in Minnesota, not that he was at the mansion. The coin, they suggest, might have been a gift from Elizabeth. The entire case is circumstantial, they argue. No witnesses, no murder weapon with his prints, no confession. But the accumulation overwhelms reasonable doubt. On July 6, 1978, the jury returns guilty verdicts on both counts of first-degree murder. The judge imposes mandatory life sentences. Roger Caldwell will die in prison unless something extraordinary happens. Marjorie's trial is scheduled separately. Her defense team has time to study the prosecution's approach, time to prepare. The trial begins in July 1979 in Hastings, Minnesota. The state presents the same basic theory. Marjorie needed money. Elizabeth wouldn't provide it. Marjorie recruited Roger to kill her mother. The motive is clear. The benefit is enormous, millions in inheritance. But the evidence is thinner. No fingerprints. No physical presence at the crime scene. The phone calls between Colorado and Minnesota prove contact, not conspiracy. The debts prove financial pressure, not murder planning. The defense hammers this repeatedly. Where is the proof Marjorie asked Roger to kill? Where is the recorded conversation? Where is the witness who heard her say it? The prosecution calls attention to Marjorie's history, the fires, the spending, the pattern of destruction. They paint a picture of a woman capable of orchestrating murder for money. But capability isn't proof. The jury deliberates for days. They're deadlocked. Some believe she's guilty, others demand more concrete evidence. The judge declares a mistrial. The state tries again. A second trial begins in 1979 with a different jury. The prosecution refines its approach, but the fundamental problem remains. They cannot prove Marjorie explicitly ordered the murders. The defense presents her as a woman with poor financial judgment, but no capacity for violence. A difficult daughter, perhaps, but not a murderer. This time, the jury reaches a verdict. Not guilty on all counts. Marjorie walks free in July 1979. She inherits approximately $2.5 million from Elizabeth's estate. Not the full amount she might have hoped for, as other family members and charitable organizations receive substantial portions, but enough to clear her debts and live comfortably. The very money the prosecution argued she killed for now funds her freedom. Roger remains in prison, maintaining his innocence, claiming he's been framed. His attorneys file appeals. In 1982, the Minnesota Supreme Court overturns his conviction on technical grounds related to jury selection and evidence handling. The state faces a decision: retry Roger Caldwell with the same evidence, risk another acquittal, and spend another year in court. Or offer a deal. They offer a deal, plead guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder, sentence of time served, which by 1982 amounts to 5 years. Immediate release. Roger's attorneys advise him to take it. Fighting could mean another conviction and life behind bars. Accepting means freedom, though it also means admitting guilt. He takes it. In 1982, Roger Caldwell pleads guilty and walks out of prison. The man whose fingerprints were found at a double murder scene, who traveled to Minnesota the day of the killings, who tried to sell Elizabeth's coin, admits to the crimes but serves only 5 years. The legal system has processed the case and produced a result that satisfies almost no one. Marjorie has her inheritance. Roger has his freedom. Elizabeth and Velma remain dead. The Congdon family fractures over the verdicts. Some believing justice was served, others convinced the wrong person was acquitted. Duluth watches both defendants leave Minnesota, wondering how murders this obvious resulted in outcomes this unsatisfying. The trials are over. The story is just beginning. Glensheen passes to the University of Minnesota in 1979, exactly as Elizabeth intended years before her death. The bequest was written into her will long before anyone conceived of murder. She wanted the mansion preserved, open to the public, maintained as an example of Gilded Age architecture in Minnesota history. The university accepts, converts the estate into a historic site, and begins offering tours. 40,000 people visit in the first year. They come to see Tiffany glass and carved mahogany, but they also come because of the murders. The guides navigate this carefully. Yes, 2 women died here. Yes, it was violent. But the house itself is the story, they insist. The craftsmanship, the history, the Congdon family's role in building Minnesota. The murders are mentioned, acknowledged, then moved past. Most visitors aren't satisfied with that approach. They want to see where Velma died. They want to stand in Elizabeth's bedroom, dark tourism wrapped in architectural appreciation. Marjorie disappears into a series of marriages and financial schemes. The inheritance money vanishes quickly, spent with the same compulsive intensity that defined her earlier life. By 1983, she's married again, this time to Wallace Hagan. That marriage lasts several years before collapsing under familiar pressures. Her spending, his frustration, debts that accumulate faster than income. Then the legal troubles begin in earnest. 1992. Marjorie is charged with arson in Arizona after a suspicious fire at a property she owns. The pattern from her youth resurfaces. She's convicted, serves time, and is released. 1994. She's charged with insurance fraud related to another fire. Another conviction. More prison time. The woman acquitted of murdering her mother now builds a criminal record for exactly the kind of behavior people always suspected. 2007. Marjorie is arrested in Arizona and charged with forgery and theft. She's been writing fraudulent checks, stealing from people who trusted her. The amounts are relatively small, thousands rather than millions, but the audacity is remarkable. A woman who inherited millions from her murdered mother now commits petty crimes for modest sums. She's convicted again. More prison time. Roger Caldwell's trajectory is shorter and darker. After his release in 1982, he moves between states, struggles with employment, battles alcoholism and depression. The guilt plea haunts him. He maintains to anyone who will listen that Marjorie orchestrated everything, that he was manipulated, that the legal system failed to hold the real killer accountable. Whether this is truth or self-justification is impossible to determine. May 19, 1988. Roger Caldwell dies in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. The official cause is suicide. He's found with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He's 53 years old. Whatever he knew about the planning of Elizabeth's murder dies with him. If Marjorie gave explicit orders, if there were conversations about how to stage the scene, if conspiracy existed beyond what prosecutors could prove, those details are now inaccessible. Marjorie lives decades longer. She cycles through marriages, legal problems, and prison sentences. Each conviction adds to a pattern that makes her acquittal in the murder trial seem increasingly improbable. The justice system that couldn't convict her of killing her mother has no trouble convicting her of arson, fraud, and theft. She becomes a case study in criminal psychology, a woman whose compulsions lead inevitably to destruction. She dies on March 24, 2020 in Tucson, Arizona. She's 87 years old, living in a nursing home, far from Minnesota, and the mansion where she grew up. The obituaries are brief. Some mention she was acquitted of murder. Others focus on her later convictions. None suggest she lived a life of peace or redemption. The Congdon family, what remains of it, maintains distance from Marjorie's memory and from Glensheen itself. Some family members refuse to visit the mansion, unable to separate the architecture from the violence. Others have made peace with the university's stewardship, grateful the house survived and serves some educational purpose. Glensheen continues. The tours run year-round. The gardens are maintained to historical accuracy. The interiors remain precisely as they were, minus the items Roger stole and the bloodstains that have been cleaned. Visitors walk through rooms where Elizabeth lived for decades, stand on the staircase where Velma died, and take photographs of details that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. The mansion has become exactly what Elizabeth intended, a preserved piece of history. It has also become what she never could have imagined, a monument to family dysfunction and the violence that money sometimes breeds. Today, Glensheen stands precisely as Chester Congdon intended, The brick remains solid. The limestone hasn't crumbled. The Tiffany windows catch light exactly as they did in 1908. 40,000 visitors walk through these rooms every year. More than ever lived here. More than Chester could have imagined when he commissioned a private mansion for his family. The house has outlasted the fortune that built it, outlasted the dynasty it was meant to establish, outlasted everyone who witnessed its construction. The tour guides have a difficult job. They must present architecture without ignoring murder. They explain the provenance of Italian marble, while acknowledging that a woman was bludgeoned on the staircase where that marble was installed. They point out hand-carved details in the ceiling while standing in rooms where someone plotted death for inheritance. The mansion is simultaneously a masterpiece of craftsmanship and a crime scene. Both facts are true. Neither can be emphasized without diminishing the other. Most visitors come because of the murders. They've read about the case, watched documentaries, heard the story of the wealthy heiress killed by her adopted daughter, or allegedly killed, or killed by her daughter's husband while the daughter maintained plausible deniability. The legal ambiguity bothers people. Marjorie was acquitted. That's a fact. Roger pleaded guilty but served only 5 years. Also a fact. The mathematical equation doesn't balance. 2 brutal murders equal 1 questionable conviction and 1 complete acquittal. Justice, if it was served incompletely. The question persists. Did Marjorie plan her mother's death? The jury said no. Public opinion has never wavered from yes. The circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. She needed money desperately. She stood to inherit millions. She had a history of destructive behavior. Her husband left fingerprints at the murder scene. He tried to sell Elizabeth's possessions. He eventually admitted guilt. But admission of guilt isn't proof of conspiracy. Roger could have acted alone, motivated by his own debts, his own desperation. Marjorie could be exactly what she claimed, a daughter with financial problems, but no involvement in murder, except her life after the acquittal suggests otherwise. The pattern of fires resurfaces, the fraud. Convictions accumulate. The woman acquitted of matricide spends decades committing exactly the kinds of crimes people always suspected she was capable of. This doesn't prove she killed Elizabeth, but it does suggest the jury might have misjudged her capacity for criminality. The other question is simpler but equally unresolved. Did Roger act alone? The prosecution argued conspiracy. They believed Marjorie provided information, encouragement, perhaps a key to enter Glensheen, but they couldn't prove it. Roger maintained Marjorie orchestrated everything, that he was manipulated into murder by a woman who understood how to use people. After his death, that claim became impossible to verify or refute. The truth died with him in Pennsylvania in 1988. What the case reveals is uncomfortable and enduring. Extraordinary wealth does not prevent family dysfunction. Gilded Age mansions can house the same violence as any other building. Money amplifies human behavior, both generous and destructive. Elizabeth Congdon spent decades giving her fortune away to worthy causes. Her adopted daughter spent decades trying to acquire more. Both were products of the same privilege, the same environment, the same access to resources. One chose philanthropy. The other chose, or at least enabled, murder. The mansion itself bears witness without judgment. The rooms don't care who walks through them. The Tiffany glass doesn't distinguish between tourists and murderers. The craftsmanship remains excellent regardless of the moral failures of the people who commissioned it. This is perhaps the most unsettling realization. Beauty and violence coexist without contradiction. The house is genuinely magnificent. The murders were genuinely brutal. Both statements are true simultaneously. Chester Congdon built Glensheen to establish permanence, to create something that would outlast his lifetime and announce his family's arrival among American aristocracy. He succeeded beyond reasonable expectation. The house stands. It's preserved. It's admired. 40,000 people pay admission annually to walk through rooms he designed. But the legacy he intended has been corrupted by events he couldn't foresee. The Congdon name is famous, but not for iron ore or philanthropy. It's famous because Elizabeth was murdered and Marjorie was acquitted. The tours continue, the gardens are maintained. The mansion exists in a strange temporal space, simultaneously frozen in 1908 and marked permanently by 1977. Visitors photograph the breakfast room where the family once gathered. They stand in Elizabeth's bedroom, where she was smothered. They walk the staircase where Velma Piatila died, trying to protect her patient. History and crime scene, landmark and murder site, architectural achievement, and family tragedy. Glensheen will outlast everyone reading this. The brick and limestone and mahogany will stand for another century, perhaps longer. Future visitors will walk these halls knowing even less about the Congdons than we do now. The murders will fade into historical curiosity. The mansion will remain, beautiful and cold and permanent, exactly as Chester intended. A monument to wealth, craftsmanship, and the uncomfortable truth that money solves many problems but creates others. The Gilded Age built structures that still stand. Some of them are haunted by more than architectural history. If this story of wealth, murder, and the dark side of the American dream pulled you in, hit that like button. And if you want more deep dives into the forgotten scandals of America's most opulent families, subscribe. Because the mansions of the Gilded Age hold more secrets than their architects ever intended, and we're just getting started uncovering them.